welcome to Across the Hooniverse. This is Dave Ringo, and this is the Scoops and Revelations series. We're going to be looking at what we learned from Rosa, the third story of Series 11 of Doctor Who, in case you didn't know. So, what are some of the things that we learned from Rosa? One of the interesting things that happened at the beginning is we learned that the Doctor is not able to steer the TARDIS very well. Again, it reminds us a lot of, the William Hartnell era. But we learned that from Graham, Bradley Walsh's character, that the Doctor tried 14 times to get them back to their own time on Earth, and she still failed. They now land in 1955, late November 1955. Okay. So why is the TARDIS not working? Well, the TARDIS apparently is trying to keep her from going back to contemporary times, brings her on purpose to 1955, and maybe it's because that time traveler is there, the other time traveler. But then where were the other 13 trips to? Did they all land in 1955? Or is there some kind of fight going on between the Doctor working the controls and the TARDIS wanting to go to 1955? It's unclear. One interesting comment the Doctor makes is that she at some point gave Elvis Presley a mobile phone. And we don't know if she's joking at first, like at the beginning. She says it, and the Doctor makes these jokes all the time. So, you don't know if they're jokes. The Doctor makes a joke about being Banksy, and I think that is an actual joke. That's not to be taken seriously. But in this case, it is shown to be correct that the Doctor did indeed give Elvis a mobile phone, because she sets up something later where Elvis gave his mobile phone to Frank Sinatra. I guess she called Elvis and it was Frank Sinatra, and she set up the concert that they could invite the bus driver to later on. One interesting thing about the Doctor in this story is that she seems to have a very detailed knowledge of Earth's history. I mean, knowing exact dates and things. That seems to be a better education than the Doctor ever has had in history before. Not sure how I feel about that, because I kind of like the Doctor not being familiar with Earth customs and Earth ways and not everything in Earth history, just to kind of have a vague knowledge of it. But now the Doctor appears to be an authority on Earth history. Well, at least she knows about these sorts of issues. One of the interesting points, and this is something I think is going to come back in the future episode, is, this time traveler, whoever he is, he's got a time vortex manipulator, which we've seen before from Captain Jack. But he has a case. And in the case has initials on it. GFB. What does that stand for? My guess is that it doesn't stand for anyone or anything that we've already heard of before. I think it's something that we're going to find out about in the future, in one of the episodes of this season, but we still don't know yet. But I think it's a clue to something that's coming up. There's going to be a GFB that comes into the story. So it's not the last we've heard of this time traveler, whoever he is. I wouldn't call him a time agent like Captain Jack was. I think he stole that vortex manipulator. And he also has a weapon that he stole, which was, what was it called? A temporal displacement weapon. They don't actually call it a name. We also find out that he was in prison at a place called the Storm Cage, which, I don't know if you caught this or not, but that's the prison that River Song was confined in earlier. So there's a callback to an earlier episode. I think that would be the Time of Angels. But this Krasko guy, whoever he is, we don't know what time he's from. The vortex, the temporal displacement weapon is set to send the person to the 79th century, but we don't know if that's the century he's from. We get the impression, though, he is from the future. And this is the part that kind of bothered me a bit. There are racists in the future. Now, that part, of course there'd be racists, I guess, in the future. But racists against black people in the future. Like, it's the same racism. It's not like a new racism against, like, the blue people or anything like that. It's the same old racism. And that's not very hopeful as far as future history is concerned. Oh, and that time traveler, Krasko, he is sent to the past by Ryan, way back to the past, like at the beginning of almost everything. So, not sure if he's going to come into play again, but he might. He can actually mess up history even worse back there. There's another interesting point made in the story, and that is about changing time. You know, there are people who believe, theorists in time travel, and you see this borne out in many other shows or movies, that time is like a river, and basically you can change little things, but the river is just going to flow, the water is just going to flow right back to where it was. So you can't, like, you could do little things, but you can't really change very much the stream of time as it flows. It's just going to flow in the same direction. There's not much you can do about it. You stick your foot into the water's just going to flow around it, but it's going to go to the same place. But here we find, and we already know this about the Doctor Who universe, but some people still don't like to believe this about the Doctor Who universe, and that is just the slightest nudges in one direction or another can have lasting repercussions. Time can be changed, and it can be altered drastically even by relatively minor changes. I mean, that's what we saw in, for example, that classic story, The Pyramids of Mars, where just the fact that the Doctor and Sarah landed in the past, just them being there and interacting in minor ways, changed the future so that in 1980, the world was destroyed. Now that is a very minor nudge. But see, that's what can happen in the Doctor Who universe. Little things done can have major repercussions. At the end, when the Doctor takes them all to see the asteroid number 284996, called Rosa Parks, that's actually a real asteroid. That's not made up for the show. So apart from the, of course, major historical lessons that we learned from this story, those are some of the other scoops and revelations concerning the Doctor's backstory and time travel and some of the sci-fi elements of the story. So I will see you again next week when we will consider arachnids in the UK. Stay tuned.